So yeah, just for the recording, this is the research found on the Nottingham Bioresource. So who we are. We are a team based here at Nottingham University Hospital. So we work in the R&I department. We're NHS research staff. We work with clinicians and academic researchers, patient representatives, and we're an ethically approved research tissue bank that's based here in the hospital. So what we do, we collect tissue samples and data from patients who enrol to the Bioresource here in Nottingham. We use the samples and data for research studies, which are approved internally by our access committee. So what we hope to do as Nottingham Bioresource is connect high quality samples and data to researchers that need the samples for their various research studies. So whether it's lab-based studies, clinical trials, anywhere in between. Historically, there was a biobank in Nottingham across the hospitals, and a few years ago it paused to undergo a full audit. That's been complete, and then at the later end of 2021, we've gone back out for the ethical approval for our Human Tissue Authority licence, which you have to work with these samples. That's all in place now, so we're up and running again as a biobank in Nottingham, and that's why we're reaching out now to do these research land events. So starting off broadly, what is a biobank? So obviously, a biobank is a collection of samples, so bodily fluids, tissue, biopsies, various things like that. And you can sort of imagine it like a library. So we keep them all in store and they go out to researchers and they can request them, check them out. Sometimes they come back to us. So that's the most simple analogy. The samples are collected for research use. Sometimes they have data stored with them. Sometimes we collect that down the line. It all just depends on what research needs to be done with it. The samples are really important to help support biomedical studies. So it ranges from really basic sample storage where they just want things to test very basic drugs on, or very basic tests, or more sophisticated analysis models. And biobanks do operate all over the world. There's approximately 280 in the UK. That number changes pretty constantly. So from when I had that number in November, that could be quite different now. Some biobanks are quite specific. So they might look at one particular disease, or they might be a cancer biobank, or only look at certain diseases in children's, whereas others are broad and they collect a whole range of tissues from a whole range of donors. And ours is that latter one. So we're quite a broad biobank here in Nottingham. So our structure, so we sit across the hospital. So for those of you that don't know, we've got two campuses, QMC and City. So we've got sites that work across both of those. And then there's the research and innovation umbrella, and there's all the various clinical and treatment pathways, which are obviously what patients are used to seeing and being involved with. So we kind of sit underneath those and tap into both of those pathways. So we're supporting the researchers, but often the researchers are also clinicians, and they want to say, actually, I want to help this particular set of patients. How can the biobank or the Nottingham Bioresource help us to collect these samples, to look at these questions we've got and see if we can improve patient outcomes? And then you can see at the bottom there, we have a management and quality committee and an access committee. So I won't get too much into that. We'll go a little bit onto the access committee later, but they just help us manage things day to day. So they make sure that we're following all the regulations and all the legal basis that are set out in the UK, and make sure we're running in the right direction and we are supporting research where it's needed. So as it says on the side there, the access committee, they help us review any requests that come in. And we've got medical academic reps as well as information governance. So they make sure that the data's being sent in the right format and is not breaching GDPR and all of those things. And we also have patient reps. So we've got Debbie on the call as well, and she'll be doing a Q&A session later on in the presentation. So samples we collect, again, this is not an exhaustive list, and it's quite broad. So we've got blood samples, saliva samples, urine, biopsy, and then tissue samples. So that could either be it's frozen, so that image there you can see is one of our -80 freezers with samples in, or we've got tissue blocks, which you'll see on some of the other slides, and we've got slides, which are sort of glass sections of tissue. Not all samples for patients do necessarily come to us in the Bioresource. So the tissue samples we've got, or bloods, it's their access to diagnosis and treatment. So patients coming in might be having a surgery. If they've consented to donate samples to us, they'll have their surgery and all their treatment as standard. But then anything that might be left over could come to the Bioresource and then can be used in the future for research. And also, not all samples are necessarily stored. So we have a range of different research we can support. Some of them are retrospective, so we will bank the samples and store them in the freezer or in the block store, or we'll have prospective, so they're for fresh tissue. So for researchers that need fresh blood so that they can look at live cells in the more fresh tissue samples. So it really does just depend on what research is going on at the time, what we do. So some samples are in and out in a day, and some samples get stored and might get shipped in a batch in 3 years' time because they need the numbers of the patients to be collected first. So it's quite a movable feast for how we do things, but there's a lot of different options that way, so we can support a lot of research. So the researchers we do support, so again, this is quite varied. So we've got NHS researchers, so that could be here in Nottingham, it could be other trusts up and down the country. We've got academic researchers, so the University of Nottingham, Trent University, or other universities in this country, and also abroad. Occasionally we do get the universities from outside of the UK. We've got commercial researchers, so they could be pharma companies looking at drug development, things like that, and then other. So there aren't too many in this category, but charity research, for example, does fall into that other category. And as I sort of alluded to before, all of these researchers, they could be in Nottingham and could be local, they could be elsewhere in the UK, or they could be abroad. So they could be in Europe, they could be in America, they could be over in Asia. So there's loads of different options for who we support, and we try not to be restrictive, but obviously they do need to then still come through our access committee. So the standards of which we will review and approve research requests coming through will always be the same process, so it doesn't vary from region to region. So consent is the big one. So for all the samples that we've got in the bioresource, we obtain informed consent from all participants before we take any samples and data. So what we want to do in that instance is we always want the initial approach to talk about the bioresource to come from the direct care team. So we don't want someone at the patient going up to them and saying, oh, do you want to sign up to this? And it be completely out of the blue. And actually we don't feel that that's a particularly ethical way to go about things. So the direct care team will have that first conversation, and then a consent discussion will be had. So that again might be their clinician, or they might ask the patient if they want someone from the bioresource to come and talk to them about whether they want to donate samples. But it will always be someone that knows the bioresource, they've been consent trained by us, and they can answer any questions that the participant might have so that they can feel like they're making an informed decision and they know all their options. We have various information sheets available for adults, and then so we've also got approval to consent children if they want to donate samples, and we've got a range of age brackets for them. So there's a variety of levels of understanding in those sheets so that they can feel like they're participating and they can get involved as well. Participants can withdraw at any time. So the consent that we take endures until the patient decides that they don't want to participate anymore. At that point, where we can, we get rid of any data and samples, obviously under the understanding if it's already been used, there's a finite amount we can do, but that's all outlined in our information sheets. Consent, also us having consent in place doesn't necessarily mean that we've got samples in the bank. It might be that all that tissue that is taken is needed for the patient care and it is needed for diagnosis. So at that point, the consent would be on our record, but we wouldn't have any samples because the patient care is still coming first and foremost. So quick case study. So we opened sort of November time, December last year. We've had a few projects that have come through our access committee. So this is the first one, as you can tell by its number, BRM1. So it came through and it's a request for some blood samples, so serum samples, and they're looking at markers in COVID-19 patients. So we did have a collection of patients from the past couple of years that we've got samples in the freezers for. So this study needed about 140 donors, and obviously we've got consented samples in the bank. They need some clinical data as well. So they want to know age and comorbidities, whether they had any treatment, long-term effects of COVID, that kind of thing. And the outcome of this study is to look at markers which might help predict how a patient is going to feel if they've got COVID. So if they're going to have a really bad case of it and they might need to go to the ICU, or if they're actually not as susceptible to feeling quite poorly with it. And it also might help find new targets for drug development. So it's quite a broad basis for some other studies going forwards. So this case study It came through, it went to the Access Committee, and what we do there is we discuss the feasibility, so whether we have the samples to support the study, the potential merit of the projects. It might be that we've had something very similar through before, and actually what we don't want to do is keep using samples for the same research and then we run out and we've not got anything that we can move forwards with. And also whether we can support them under our ethics approval. So under the terms of what we've been given, does that align with what we're doing? Are they doing anything against what we've said we want to support? So things like that would be if they want to do any research on animals, that's something we've said we're not going to do the bioresource. So it's looking at things like that and going, actually, that's not something we could support for what you actually want to do. The samples and data we only release when we've got contracts and agreements in place. So what we want to do is make sure that all the samples are traceable and that we know where everything is going, it's accounted for, and make sure that we're compliant. And all the data and the samples are pseudonymized, so they're delinked. So rather than sending them with a name and a date of birth, they would have a unique identifier for that patient that the researcher wouldn't be able to break. And then rather than date of birth, they might have age if they needed the age of the patient, so that you couldn't identify that patient in any way. So in a nutshell, that is the bioresource, and the next section we've got is our Ppi Qa Session. So I think Kate's going to help out with this one and lead a bit of a Q&A with Debbie, who's one of our Ppi reps.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Natasha. That was extremely informative and quite fascinating to see the process laid out like that. Before we jump in to our Q&A with our wonderful research volunteer, Debbie Butler, I just wanted to make sure if anyone had any questions at this point, anything about what Natasha has spoken about to date, and if anything is unclear, or if you just have any, generic questions along the lines of inquiry. So you can raise your hand. I can see everyone on screen at the moment, so feel free to jump in, or you can pop something in the chat box if you're more comfortable with that. So has anyone got any questions before we go on to the Q&A? No? Okay. No problem. That's fine. Seriously, it's an open, safe space. So any question, if you're thinking it, someone else probably is as well. So yeah, we've got a more opportunity for discussions and questions following this. So so moving on, and I want to welcome Deborah Butler to the session. So do you want to take us off screen share for this?
Yes, no problem.
So we can see the lovely Debbie. And we can see each other. Hey, there we are. Hello again, everyone. Hello, Debbie.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to do this Q&A session. So for the benefit of everyone else, we thought it would be wonderful to hear firsthand experience of someone who has also recently become involved in Bioresource. As we know, it's relatively new for Nottingham, the relaunched Bioresource, but we thought it'd be fab to hear firsthand from Debbie, who is one of our research volunteers in research and innovation. And the work that she's been doing a wonderful job of supporting Natasha and the team. So I'm just going to ask a few questions. And it's a bit like a couch session Q&A. So I'm going to ask a few questions, quite informal. Is that okay, Debbie, if we get started?
Yeah, happy. Yeah.
Wonderful. So yeah, as an introduction, I just thought it'd be really nice if you could introduce yourself, your involvement today, and how you became involved in the bioresource as well. Is that all right?
Yeah. Well, hi everybody, and thank you for coming. I've been involved in research, volunteering, and as a patient contributor for about 21 years now. So things have changed an awful lot since I started, and I get quite excited talking about it because it for me it's been about the value that I get from it, and the experience of being a patient, both physically and mentally, has given me a lot of experiences which I'm able to share with the various organisations that I work for. But being part of the Bioresource committee, like Kate said, I'm very new to, but it's been challenging. I think it's been challenging for all of us in the respect that we need to get to know each other, and there are lots of things that just go over the top of my head. And Natasha's been very patient and sat with me and said what would different words mean. But it's been very useful, and I've really enjoyed being part of it. And I think I'm new to it, and the Bioresource is new, so we work together. And I think as a patient contributor, it's quite exciting to be there at the start of a new project. Sometimes in research, you're not involved until the very end. Some researchers think, well, we'll ask them where to send the information at the end, and the dissemination never gets out. So, but I'm lucky enough to be involved in a lot of different things, and learning about the Bioresource Centre has been very interesting. Challenging at times, but interesting.
Wonderful. It's I can see Natasha smiling there. It sounds like you've been on the journey together, which you know is wonderful to hear. So yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Debbie. So I guess following on from that, what were your motivations? So why did you want to get involved in the Nottingham Bioresource? Was it something in particular that motivated you?
Yeah, part of it was personal experience as a patient. I've never been very physically well all my life, so I've been in and out of hospital most of it, and the different experiences I've had of being a patient and having samples taken, and really that's the end you hear. They'll say, well, let's take a sample, you know, do you consent to a sample? And you do, but they don't give you a clue about what's going to happen to that. They'll get back in touch with you if, you know, things are not right, but quite often I've experienced the fact that they don't get back to you, and you're not fully informed about it. But hopefully with the Resource Centre we will get over that hurdle, so people will understand and know what's happening with their private lives, really, because it does involve being consented and talked to about the research. But I think I hate to repeat myself, but it's been exciting. It's been frustrating because I'm quite busy in the volunteering capacity, but I think one of the challenging things is because we're not able to meet face to face, and as yet myself and the other public contributor haven't managed to actually see the facility face to face. Natasha's been very good and took lots and lots of photographs, and we've had a look at those. But for me, it'd be great when we can actually go back into the hospital and be there and see exactly what's happening, because that, like you probably all know about, since lockdown began we've worked virtually, and it has its challenges, and I could just go on the challenges that are there, but you know, I'm more than happy to work through those, and I think every day is a learning day. I hate that sentence, but every day is a learning day, and I enjoy that. So
yeah, brilliant. I think I can appreciate that. It is for us. And you mentioned at the beginning, you've been in this for 21 years, which is outstanding. And its research team seems to change day to day. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes over 21 years. And yes, absolutely. So I think, you know, as we're moving hopefully now out of a lot of the restrictions that we've seen during the pandemic, we are hopefully going to be able to open up some of the behind the scenes of research. And I think part of this event is opening up and trying to raise awareness of what Bioresource is. And I think, like you said, it definitely helps, Debbie. And so that's some great feedback to see something tangible and to see it. A picture's great, but I think actually being there and amongst it is something that we 100% want to, you know, open up again. So no, thank you so much for that. I guess from leading on from that as well, and it might be very interesting for the attendees to hear about how you've actually contributed to the bioresource. So how have you been involved to date? So what activities have you supported Natasha and the team with?
Well, I've been to a couple of the big committee meetings, and they, again, I was very not anxious, but it was hard work because a lot of what was said just went straight over the top of my head. But I don't give up on things, and I'm like, well, if I can find out about what that means, then to me that helps my involvement. And I think the academics and the researchers who are on the committee have done nothing but show a lot of respect for myself and my colleague who contribute to the committee. And I think it's been a learning curve for both sides, and it's all very exciting getting new things going. And I think when we first started, there was a form that we did that we review, and forgive me if I'm wrong on this, Natasha, but I think didn't myself and Michael help update that form, because there were bits that had been missed off, and there were bits we didn't understand, and there were bits that just needed adjusting. And I think I was very pleased and proud that we were able to alter that form. It still is difficult to understand a lot of it, but we are putting together hopefully a jargon buster along the way, so people who come after me, because I'm not going to be around forever, but not yet, I'm not going anywhere yet, but I want to leave a legacy for people who come after me, and I think that is most important. But also I want to leave a legacy with the academics to help them understand the fullness of people's experiences and how we can work together on research and develop new treatments and new ideas and new technology, because a lot of it is around technology these days. But I've not been to a lot of meetings, but Natasha, myself and the other public contributor have had extra meetings to ask questions that maybe we don't have time to ask at the bigger committee meeting. And I think, the big thing is I felt respected, and I respect the other people on the committee because I really felt listened to. And I think sometimes in the work I do, people do it as a tick box exercise, and you're not really listened to. They're saying, well, we've got a public contributor, and therefore we're winning. We've got a public contributor, but you have to work together to get through it. It's not just ticking that box. It's actually using that connection and that respect for each other, I think, makes it really worthwhile.
It's amazing to hear that, and it really feels like you're fully embedded and part of the team in that the decision making. So, and the jargon buster, that should be standard. A lot of the terminology goes over my head as well. So it's fantastic to hear how you've contributed, and like you say, you're on the start of the journey, and I do think that your contributions are going to be so valued in this, so that we can try and make it as accessible as possible and continue to raise awareness. So I just want to thank you again. Absolutely. I'm going to finish off now, and this is kind of like a question as we lead on next into our kind of discussion. So food for thought, but from your experience of working closely with the Bioresource, have you made any observations that we could, improve how we work, how we raise awareness, how we can be more transparent? Have you noticed anything? And this could be past or looking forward to the future as well. Would you be able to comment on that?
I think, if anything, for me, I think it's been quite restrictive doing it virtually, and I think I would love to see it working on a face-to-face basis, because I think it has been difficult for a lot of people working virtually over lockdown, me included, and I work so much better face to face. But I think I can't think of one specific thing that needs to keep going, but I think it's about keeping that experience going and not letting it sort of taper off. And I think, like I've said before, I think it's the respect that people show for each other and the respect that these samples are part of people, and how we show respect to the actual samples, for instance. And I think as long as we stick with those values, I think it will grow and be good. And it certainly has put my mind, it's cleared my head a bit with all the samples I've given as a patient. And I know some of them didn't go to the bioresource, but it sort of put some of my experiences to bed, if you like, that I now understand a bit more about it. So hopefully I can use those experiences to help develop the committee and the resource centre itself. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, fantastic, Debbie. So, I mean, that's all my questions. And thank you so much for all those answers that, you know, really gave us a different perspective on the bioresource. I mean, you're welcome to add anything else, if anything else you'd like to say that I didn't tease out of you.
I just think, for me, because I've been involved in research for so long, I just get, as a public contributor and as a patient, I'm really passionate about involvement. And I think I just want to say again that being part of it right from the beginning makes it that bit more worthwhile, because you grow as a team and you get to know each other and how you work. And I think if all that, you know, that work actually starts before the work begins, getting to know each other and getting that respect and keeping that respect for each other and people's values, but also at the same time learning to deal with conflict, because as yet there hasn't been any, but I think whatever we do in life, things do happen where conflict arises, but it's about getting through that and understanding each other's side of the argument. And I think as long as we can keep on continuing to do that in patient involvement, then I think we can go far. So
yeah, fantastic. I think we love a healthy debate. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
The respectful, healthy debate. And I think, you know, hopefully, like you said, from being involved from inception, you will really be able to see the impact that you're making with the bioresource, and we can already see it. So yeah, thank you so much, Debbie. That's fab, and I think that it really leads us in perfectly to our discussion topic. So the next session, which we've planned for about 15 minutes for, but of course it depends how much we all want to talk. I could talk all night. So how long have you got? So yeah, the discussion topic we would love to kind of get your thoughts, perceptions on, is generally around, after hearing about the bioresource now, what is your overall perception of it? So firstly, do you have any questions? Is anything unclear? And is there any information that we haven't given you? Is there any unanswered questions? So when we are talking to people about the bioresource, could we be more clear? Is there anything that, you know, you didn't understand about it? So I mean, I'd like to open the floor. I understand that people here are probably coming from different exposures to bioresource. I'd be interested to hear if anyone has been involved in the UK Biobank, for example, or has donated their samples to a bioresource. So again, it's an open, safe space. So please do contribute, but equally don't feel obliged. It's absolutely fine. So has anyone any comments, questions about that topic? we're fine. We're fine. That's fine. Hello. Oh, Leslie, you came off mute. Did you want to add something? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I have put you on the spot accidentally.
Is there ever a way for you to give a generic consent that whenever you give a sample, whenever a sample is taken from you, it can be used by Biobank rather than individual consultants asking for whatever research they want to be doing?
Yes, that's a really good question. So the way we do our consent, it is quite general. So what we want, that's why we have sort of an enduring clause in our consent. So rather than patients being asked every time they come in for a blood test or every time they come in for a surgery, they're asked for the same consent form over and over again. They would get asked once, and then we would put, what we do is we put an alert on the patient's medical record. So when they come back in for another test or another sampling, that will pop up to the clinicians and go, actually, we can take this sample and we can send that back off to the bioresource. So they won't need to go through that consent process a number of times. So that's one of the things we try to do, is to minimize the number of times the patients are being approached for these questions, because it's a big burden, isn't it, to keep having that conversation.
I mean, I won't particularly mind having, I don't see it as a big burden, Natasha. I see the value of research, because if I want somebody to use research in order to develop better treatments or understand the cause of disease, I think I've got to be prepared at the other end to contribute to it.
Yeah, and we get a lot of patients as well. So I was involved with the previous biobank in Nottingham and speaking to patients, sort of consent conversations, going, well, what do I need it for? I don't need it back, kind of thing, and going, well, you know, it's gonna carve that path for the patients coming after me, and okay, I might not get any direct benefit now, but my children might, or my grandchildren might, or you know, and it's a very selfless thing for patients to do. But yeah, it's really important. So yeah, we do try and have that generic consent, so that patients, because often they do want to contribute everything they can, they're very selfless. So yeah, hopefully that's what the bioresource is going to capture going forwards.
Right, thank you.
No problem.
I would be interested in people's ideas or thoughts around how we make ourselves known to patients. I don't mean that we're like bombarding patients with resources and things like that, but it'd be interesting to know, to find out, as part of people's, when you go to the hospital, I think my explanation might be a bit clearer. I've been to hospital many hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's a big place, and if you know where you're going, that's fine, but you go down lots and lots of different corridors with doors going off, and because I'm quite nosy, I like to know what's going off behind those doors. And for me, it's about understanding the whole of treatment, the whole of your healthcare. I'd be interested to know what people think about how much they want to know about their care, because I know some people, myself included, when I've had many operations, it gets to a point with, for me, around, well, just get on with it, let's just do it, just get on with it. But there are other people who, again, myself included, that might think, well, why are you doing that? Or what does that mean to my treatment? And what does that mean? Will that mean I get better quicker? Will it mean I help others to get better quicker? So it would be interesting for me to find out more about how we can maybe answer those questions. And I'm not a comms person, so I have no idea. But any thoughts on that might be quite useful.
A really fascinating question, Debbie. How do we do that? I mean, like, you talk about raising awareness and seeing behind those doors, because I think that's a fantastic analogy, but it's a reality as well. And I think over the last 2 years, our doors have been closed, haven't they? And rightly so, but we're at a time now where we are very fast approaching being able to reopen the doors safely. So I think, what you mentioned earlier, Debbie, about having open days and things like that, is that something that would appeal to people? Or even how could we be more transparent with this process, for example? Because if people are more aware of it, people might be a lot more willing as well to do it. If we could maybe demystify some of the things around the bioresource and research in general. So would people, if we start off, would people be interested in attending an open day for bioresource and research, to see a bit behind the scenes, see the labs, things like that? Would that be something people would be interested in?
I think that's a good idea. It would demystify, wouldn't it? And you'd also be able to get across to a wider audience as to what you're doing and what your aims are. So I think what Debbie's suggested, that it would just remove that mystery as to what it's about. And I think answer the question that some patients with research, they think, well, what's in it for me? And, that can be as equally tackled.
I think that sounds like a really good idea. And I think maybe what would be nice as well, obviously, because we're so new, we don't have we don't have any completed projects at the minute. They're all very much in their infancy, but in the future, we could get researchers back in to talk about their results. So actually, I had these samples, and this, even if we can't give, it's very difficult in biobanking to give personalised results unless that's the specific type of biobank you are, which unfortunately we aren't. But even generalised findings, so you go, well, I have rheumatoid arthritis and I donated samples, and now we've got this really fantastic study in rheumatology that maybe I've helped deliver that, maybe I've helped participate, and maybe that's a really nice way of giving back to the people that are so kind to donate and give them some feedback. Obviously we want to get that on our website as well, but that face-to-face stuff it's just a bit more context, isn't it? It hits home a little bit harder than reading it on a screen. So yeah, that'd be a really nice idea.
I think you touched on another really good point about having those tangible examples, because sometimes I feel like some messaging could be like, donate today and you'll help the treatments of tomorrow. But that's very ambiguous. Whereas if you've got a case study where it can say, people donated these samples, this was the research that was done, and this is actually how it benefited patients. And I guess it's how, again, we communicate that. And I think having researchers communicate that face to face, but we should be being potentially a lot more transparent about the research we do generally and the results. But I think also with how we're using samples specifically for the Bioresource, because I don't know how people feel, but do you feel that you've really been made aware that this is happening? Did you know what a Bioresource was? And have you ever, if you have donated, have you ever been made aware if your samples have even been used or not? It's just an interesting research. I think you referred to this earlier, Debbie, as well, that you're normally not informed afterwards. And it'd be interesting to see how important people think that is as well.
I've never thought about that aspect, but I don't think I'd expect to know which trial it had gone into. Unless I signed up. I have signed up for a specific trial that I'm involved with at the moment. So I know exactly what's going to happen with that and what they're looking for. And my blood will be used for that. But to give, that's going in through, it was through a society, a patient support group. But I don't think I'd expect, if I was a bioresource, a biobank one, they can do it for anything, So that doesn't particularly bother me. But Debbie, you like to know, don't you, Debbie? You'd like to know what your specimens have gone for. Yeah.
It's just a very interesting observation. And I guess because, correct me if I'm wrong, Natasha, but if someone donates some blood samples, could they be used for numerous studies, or would it, could they be used for?
Yeah, it may well be that they could go to different studies. If we get them in, what we do is we split them into smaller aliquots. So rather than have one big 5 ml sample, we would split them into 1 milliliter at a time. And they might then be used for 5 different projects, because often the case study I used earlier, they're using 0.15 of a milliliter of serum samples. They need such a tiny amount for the research that they're doing. And we think actually there's a lot more studies coming through like that. So the rest would then have to go in the bin if they can't use it. So we think actually let's support as many as we can. So yeah, it may well be that one donation actually could support 2, 5, 10 research studies, depending on what quantities they need and what they're doing with them. So yeah, it's very hard to give those specific results back, but I'd really be keen to give as much information back, and people can seek it out as well. If we have it on our website or we have it as an optional thing, then the people that, like Debbie, when you're in your inquisitive mode, you can search it out and you can go dig in and you can ask questions and get back in touch with us as well if you want more information and see how we can give that back. And obviously some people might not be bothered or are quite happy just broadly knowing what we're doing as a whole. So it gives patients a bit of option as well, which I think is quite good.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'd like to see for research generally, but I think for something like the Bioresource, like you say, you could give a blood sample and it could contribute to 10 studies, but making sure that people know that this is how you've helped research, like just letting people know that, I think is extremely valuable. Sorry, Terika, I can see your hands up. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what everyone has said. Like there is definitely there's like a large curtain of misconceptions surrounding bioresearch, especially when people try to contribute. They either think that, okay, this wouldn't be of any use. That's one of the first things they think, because it isn't really marketed as, okay, you will see results immediately. Because if it's really a large research study, it does take a lot of time. They need a larger sample size. And you do have a lot of human resources coming in. You have a lot of experts coming into the field. I think one of the things people think is that you're going to immediately have it put into a drug development trial. Like it's going to be taken to pharma companies and it's going to help, which is possible. So people, I think we try to look, like the human mindset is trying to look for an immediate effect, rather than thinking, okay, this will contribute to society and to like research and healthcare field, but not immediately, maybe within 5 years, maybe within 7 years. Another thing could also be with donating samples. Many people have this sort of fear or paranoia that their samples might not be, how do you say it? Like it wouldn't be applicable. Like they don't know if they would be suffering from any like disease, whether that affects their donation of samples, or if their quality of the sample just wouldn't be good enough. When in reality, you do need a diverse set of samples to be able to determine, okay, this could help or this would negatively affect the process. I think that's what I thought, like taking away from all of this. I've always been interested to donate, but here you aren't allowed to donate until you're 18. I haven't really looked into like research trials as such, but in general, with any donations, whether it's tissue samples or blood samples, you aren't advised to donate it until you're 18. So, but it's still something really fascinating because you're giving back. But I think I think I've seen like infographic videos or just infographics anywhere. There's data all over it, and there's like there are references given for those who are going to read through it and say, okay, this does help them. But there's still a large audience, like there's a large percentage of the population that believes, okay, this is not worth it, unless you are part of an affected thing. If you have a family member or friend who has been affected with a disease or a disorder, and you see that these clinical trials will help with something, and if it improves it, even if it's not drug development, whether it's a treatment, something short term, I think that usually encourages people. So it takes a while for communities to come together, but I think at a point people will realize how important it is. It'll become something as important as how climate change has become so pivotal in society. It'll become a lot more relevant, hopefully.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on with both of your points there. It's trying to look at that big picture and, like you're saying, that instant gratification of like, I donate this now and then in a year there'll be this amazing result. And research doesn't always work that way. I mean, it does, and that's obviously what we want to work towards, is getting stuff out fast and getting results. But a lot of it's the long game, and the biobanking aspect plays into that big picture research that's going on. It's not as glamorous as a big clinical trial that's got multi-million pounds thrown into it, being run by this huge pharma company. It's not as big as that yet, but it's going that way. And yeah, what you were saying as well about getting a real cross section of society, getting them involved and getting them in, because you think you're this inconsequential person. You think, I'm just one person. What can my sample do? But combined, it's that community effort, isn't it? And especially rarer diseases. Biobanking is really important for that, for looking at the rarer diseases, because researchers really struggle to approach those communities and to look at treatments. And that's something where we can hopefully really push that forwards, and actually we can help and we can link in with other biobanks or cast the net wider. So yeah, you've made some really good points there about capturing the bigger picture and playing the slow game.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I've already seen like a video to raising awareness, like, I'm just one person, what could my sample do? And it's been like, I've got, my brain's in overdrive now. But fantastic comments and recommendations from everyone. And this is why we want to do events like this, to raise awareness and get everyone's perceptions and ideas, and have these kind of like idea generating. And we understand everyone's perception and experience might be different, but we want to do our best now. We're at the start of this journey, as Debbie has mentioned, and we want to propel it forward so that people are aware and they can donate. Like you said, Tarika, you wanted to donate, but you weren't sure how. So we want to make sure that we are being as accessible as possible as well. Absolutely fantastic. Has anyone got any other comments or recommendations they want to make before we move on to the final section where we're going to look at next steps for the biobank? Oh yes, Leslie, sorry.
Can I just ask another question, please?
Of course you can. Yes.
How do you update the information? Say one sample goes in from me and then I develop something. Does the biobank get updated that I've developed another illness?
So what we do at the minute, we have it's a system called Achiever, and we use that at the minute. So we put our consent in that, and when we've got samples, it goes in. So that it really just tracks all of our samples, and we can say, patient 10 has donated 10 samples of this, and we can track them in and out. What we don't do is we don't take the sort of medical history at the time we've got the sample, because we know it might change, like you were saying. So then when the research request comes in, they might want the history. So they might go, actually, did they come in diagnosed with this? And then what happened to that patient? Did they develop anything afterwards? Did they respond to treatment, or all those different things? And because so many people want such different data, we don't like to collect it and store it, because they might only want 3 fields, or they might need 30. So we don't want to take all of that data in and actually not need it, because that's not ideal either. So yeah, we can, the consent covers us to look at the medical notes. So obviously we only send out what the researchers need, and it's all pseudonymized and all of those things, but we leave it live in the hospital system, so the patient care carries on as normal. And then when the samples are needed, we take a snapshot of that time when they go out to research, so it's all up to date as much as possible. So yeah, that's a really good point, and that's partly why we don't record it, because it can change so quickly for some patients. So yeah, really good question.
Yeah, fascinating question. And I mean, I would like to reiterate that this is the start of the conversation. So what we're hoping to do is hold more events like this on a regular basis. But even between those events, you know who we are now. We're going to have our contact details. So if you have any questions after this, or even any thoughts or recommendations that come to you, then don't hesitate to contact us at all, because we'd love to take you on the journey with us. And oh yes, Tarika, would you like to come in as well?
This is silly. This is just following up on the infographic video thing. At least where I'm from, people in school, when you start off sharing videos or you share information from, I think, early on, people tend to be a lot less foreign to a concept. So with our generation, we started off with sharing a lot more, being a lot more open with mental health, being or trying to destigmatize mental health. So smaller things like this that seem smaller because they aren't discussed as much when it comes to bioresearch or trying to contribute to research fields, because right now the trend has always been medicine, has always been law, has always been engineering. While that's all great, research still does contribute to the medical side of things. And I think if people came to know how pivotal and how impactful research is to society and just so many fields in general, I think they would feel like they could be more drawn to a certain field. And that way we could have more researchers. But speaking about bioresearch, if students and like up till an age, like once they understand, like we all came to know about things like blood transfusion, everything, you learn that pretty later on, like in high school, and that's fine. But when you learn about other things, like very small things, like you learn about donating to the elderly, you learn about spending time in old age homes, and all of those things, you kind of grow up with it as a child. So when you learn about other things like this that are also beneficial to society, I think it would help people come forward. Hopefully, in the future, maybe we could encourage the generation like forthcoming with us. You know, maybe they'll be able to be a lot more impactful. Hopefully, because STEM is always growing, and hopefully they can expand it further and further. That's one of the things that would be great. Making sure that schools or at any educational level that people come to know about things like this, so it isn't that foreign.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see others nodding as well, and I think this is something that we've kind of like it's been on our agenda, but we probably haven't been as proactive with it as we need to be in you know our engagement with schools, colleges, you know, and I think that could potentially link in to our open day kind of element. I think inviting schools in to see in you know behind the scenes and learn more is certainly something that we could do, because I absolutely agree that it's good to catch people as early on in their development as we can about that. So I think yes, fantastic point. So thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Any more for any more, please do come forward. I've really enjoyed these discussions.
I feel like my to-do list is about twice as long now. I've got all these ideas in my head of like, this is what we're going to do.
No, it's exciting.
That's the idea.
It's exciting,
Yeah,
isn't
it's really good.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough, everyone. I know we're a small group tonight, but I think actually that's been quite beneficial to have quite in-depth conversations. So, yeah, I can't thank you all enough. So yeah, yeah. Any more before we move on to the kind of next steps and kind of wrap the event up? No? Well, don't worry, I have plenty of opportunity moving forward. I hope you continue with us on the journey. So yeah, and Natasha, would you like to move on to like the have you got some slides for the final stage next step?
I'll just reshare again. There's not many left. There's sort of 3 slides, so we'll run through those, and again, part of that is a little bit more Q&A at the end if it jolts anything in your memory. Has that popped up? I know it started from the beginning, but has it come through? Brill.
It has, yeah, that is full screen, yeah.
So we've just done that. Brill. So the next bit I thought I'd move on to, now we've had that really nice and productive Q&A session, is just looking at case studies. So this is things that we're hoping to do for the future of the bioresource and moving forward. So what we're trying to do with the bioresource is looking to have what we're calling active pathways, which support researchers who need those fresh samples for their research. So at the minute, we've got a cystic fibrosis pathway. That's really hard to say quite fast. A cystic fibrosis pathway that we're looking to set up. So that's looking at both paediatric patients and adult patients across the hospital. And what they need is they need fresh sputum, so like spit and saliva samples from those patients to look at the microbiome, the various different diseases, disease-causing organisms they've got in their samples, to look at how they can treat patients with cystic fibrosis and stop them getting worse and help improve their outcomes. And that sort of research is becoming increasingly important across the UK and further afield. So looking at patients with that particular disease, helping understand it better and help towards their better treatment. We've got another couple of very early doors pathways as well, but the cystic fibrosis one it's quite championed, and it's running ahead. There's some research projects that are immediately going to run off the back of it. We'll probably be able to bank some samples as well, so we'll be able to support that fresh tissue research and also then get some samples into the -80 freezers, so that if they've then got a study that goes, well, this is what we found in study 1, now we want to do study 2, but we need the same set of patients and we need a sample, we've got them ready. We can facilitate that really fast research and get them up and running and look at the next step and help. Again, big picture is what we're trying to look at. So actually, how can we future-proof this? How can we make it valuable going forwards? So for the future of the bioresource, obviously there's a constant demand for biobanking here in Nottingham. What we found while we had that brief hiatus and we were auditing all our samples, that there was a demand for biobanking, both for samples that we got in the bank and for the fresh tissue sampling, and helping set up those active pathways and get samples and link research to the clinical teams for sample collection, because there are a lot of regulations around it, the ethics and the HTA, and for an individual researcher, if they only want 10 samples, that can be really hard for them to do, and it could take them upwards of 6 months to get all of that licensing in place. And actually it takes more time to get the approvals than it does for them to do their research. So we can help try and streamline that for them and streamline it and get patients into research that might otherwise be missed because the hoops are too much to jump through from an administrative level individually for researchers. So we can help coordinate that. We want to keep running more events like this, as Kate was saying, get more feedback, and I think that's really important because biobanking is so changeable. We want to know where we can be doing more and where we can be linking in with patients. So things like open days and feeding that response back, keeping the website up to date, all of those things. And what we're hoping to do as well is form part of a core network of biobanks in the UK. So I know earlier we talked in the social space a little about the UK Biobank. So linking in with partners like that and try and harmonise what biobanking is doing across the UK, because from each bank, things are very different in how they're approaching things, how they're storing things, how they access things, and the core principles are the same, but for researchers it becomes quite difficult to navigate and which forms they need to send and how they can apply for things. So trying to make make research easier and more accessible to more people and get more patients involved and be more transparent. So that's it really. Thank you, as we were saying before, for your time and input. It really has been invaluable. We've got a couple of websites on there, and Kate will send these slides around as well, or send these details around. So we've got the nottinghamresearch.org, which is the research website, NHSP UK, that's got pages on the bioresource. That's still very much in its infancy, so that website's going to grow as we go forwards, and we're going to build on that and have a site for research and a site for patients and public, but that's where you can find that information. We've got a clinical research podcast. There's an episode there that's linked, that's myself and my colleague Jen talking about patient data and samples in research. So that's on YouTube if you want to go and give that a listen. And and any feedback, any other questions you've got, if you've got those now, that's great. Or you can email them through to either of those addresses at the bottom, and we'd be more than happy to field those. But yeah, that's it. Thank you all for your time. It's been really productive for me, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this evening. It's so greatly appreciated. As Natasha said, we will circulate the details of how to stay involved on via Eventbrite, so do watch out for that email. Specifically our website, as Natasha mentioned, our community hub, so you can sign up to hear more events like this, how to join more events like this, stay involved in the conversation about the Nottingham Bioresource. And then also we do have a brand new podcast featuring Natasha, who is talking about the Bioresource, so please do check that out as well. But I just want to thank everyone for your time again this evening. Special thanks to Natasha and Debbie for speaking at the event, and everyone for attending. And so I'll let you go a bit earlier than scheduled. But yes, thank you for your time this evening, and I hope you enjoyed the event.